Hello and welcome to Fire Safety, otherwise known as Unit 3. My name is Tom Ethan. I'm a captain with the Oregon Fire Department. Myself, Paul Cook, and Josh Larson are all contributors to this PowerPoint presentation and this week's learning about fire safety and the roles that the ready teams play in it. So without further ado, let's get going. Our unit objectives: we're going to explain the role that the ready teams play in fire safety. We're going to identify and reduce potential fire risks. We're going to describe the size-up process. We're going to conduct a basic size-up for fire emergency. And we're going to explain the basic safety precautions and identify hazardous materials. And we're going to, this year we're going to show some videos on how to extinguish small fires using a fire extinguisher. Of course, if we were in person, we would be able to do this right after this unit. But unfortunately, we have some videos that's going to display how we can use a fire extinguisher. So the topics that we are going to cover, we are going to go over the fire chemistry, talk about how to make fire, and obviously how to put fire out. We're going to talk about fire and utility hazards in the home, school, and the neighborhood. We're going to talk about that ready size up. Fire size-up considerations, firefighting resources, different ways of putting out fire, fire suppression safety, and of course safety you're going to hear throughout this presentation is a very big part of it because we want you and your buddy to stay safe. And also we're going to talk about hazardous materials. Ready teams play a very important role in fire safety by extinguishing small fires with the use of a fire extinguisher or creative resources, which you guys are going to learn about later, preventing additional fires from starting by removing the fuel source, and assisting with evacuations when necessary. Obviously, if the fire is too big, based on your size up, the best thing to do is to clear the building, and you guys be able to help out with that. So as far as your priorities, you want to help in emergencies before the professional responders arrive. So obviously the help that you can offer in either clearing a building or putting out a small fire is going to be very important. Rescuer safety is the #1 priority. Always work with your buddy and always wear your safety equipment. In the READY program, what we consider safety equipment is your helmet, your goggles, your gloves, and your vest. All very important things that you wear to protect yourself. And obviously, our goal is to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people in the shortest amount of time. This is called the fire triangle. You have heat, fuel, and oxygen. You put those three elements together and it creates a chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction is fire. So that's how you make fire. So it's very important to realize if this is the way you make it, then if you remove any one of those elements, you remove the fuel, you remove oxygen, or you remove heat, the fire is going to go out. As crazy as it sounds, there are different classes of fire. You think fire is fire, right? But there is different classes, and with the different classes of fire goes the different types of fire extinguishers as well, and we're going to talk about those shortly. But a Class A fire is considered ordinary combustibles, so typically the stuff that you'd find in a trash can. A Class B fire is flammable or combustible liquids. You would have gasoline, alcohol, things of that nature. A Class C fire is energized electrical equipment. So if a dryer starts on fire, it's considered a Class C fire until you unplug it. Once you unplug the dryer, then the fire, you're able to call it a different type of fire. But if it's plugged in, it's energized electrical equipment, and you have to use a different way to fight that fire. You have combustible metals. You have also cooking oils, which you would find in like restaurant use and things like that. So different classes of fire, again, a different way of putting them out. But it's very important that you at least recognize what type of fire you're putting out. Here are some ways that we can reduce electrical hazards in the home. We can avoid what is called the electrical octopus. Now, if you look at the picture, basically you have an outlet in the wall. Outlets are designed to plug in 2 different things. Well, they've added ways that you can now plug up to 6 different things into those 2 outlets. With that much electricity going through there, sometimes that stuff can overheat, and that could potentially cause a fire. You don't want to run cords underneath carpets. And the reason is because the back of carpeting is very aggressive or abrasive, and as you walk over the carpeting or over the cords, then it could wear off the coating that's protecting the cords and cause the cords to become bare wires underneath there, which can cause a spark, which can cause a fire. You want to check for broken or frayed cords. You can see that the orange cord there is frayed, and that means that the casing is starting to come off of it. Or the other cord there, the brown one, is actually broken, so you may have exposed wires. Obviously two dangerous situations that you don't want to be in. Maintain your appliances. Basically what that means is you want to make sure that your appliances are running correctly. You have a bunch of dust bunnies underneath your refrigerator. Over time, the air that's supposed to be circulating down there, keeping everything cool, is going to start to make it so it doesn't cool down. It's going to make your motor work a little bit harder. Your furnace, same thing. If you don't replace the furnace filters, it's going to cause that to start working harder, which is going to cause it to overheat. So always make sure you maintain your appliances. Some of the things that would help is to know where your power shutoffs are for your appliances, your circuit breakers, or fuses, depending upon how old your home is. Circuit breakers and fuses are more for an adult, but if you're able to talk to your parents and find out if there was some type of emergency in the house and you needed to shut off your electricity, your parents can show you how to do that. And then you can also post shut-off directions next to all utilities, whether it's the water coming into your house, the natural gas coming into your house, or the electricity. It's good to know where those shutoffs are in case there is an emergency. And again, talk to your parents, but just keep in mind that if you ever turn natural gas off, you never turn it back on. That is the job of the electric company or the natural gas company. That can be very, very dangerous. And know the procedures for turning the power back on. And again, like I just said, that's something that you can go over with your parents, so that when the emergency is over and you can turn back your electricity back on, then that is something that you guys can do. But again, talk to an adult about that. And speaking of natural gas, it's considered an asphyxiant. That means it robs the body of oxygen. So if you're in an area that where there is a lot of natural gas, of course we all know what that smells like. They add a chemical to it. It's called metacaprin, and it smells kind of like rotten eggs. So basically, if you're in that atmosphere for a long time, you can get dizzy, lightheaded, because you're lacking oxygen, and you can eventually pass out. So it robs the body of oxygen, and it's also explosive, which we all know it can easily ignite. So obviously, it's not some good stuff to have about your house. So of course, one of the things that you can do is you can install a natural gas detector. Just like the carbon monoxide detectors or the smoke detectors in your house, you can also have a natural gas detector. If you have detectors in your house, make sure that you test your batteries once a month in the type of detectors that you have, and then also change the batteries every 6 months to make sure that they're working. So here is that ready size up that I talked about. So this is a 9-step size up, and what you want to do is you want to start by gathering the facts. The first person that gets there, one of the most important things is you got to know what you're dealing with if you get to an emergency. So gather the facts, talk to people, look for yourself, see what's going on. You want to assess the damage, making sure that you can actually help with whatever the damage or whatever the emergency may be. Consider the probabilities. Assess your own situation, establish your priorities, making sure that you stay safe and that you can help people. Number 6 is make decisions. Number 7 is develop an action plan. So based on what you've seen and how you see things are going right now, you have to develop an action plan. Number 8 is take action. So whatever your action plan is, you want to take action. And number 9 is you want to evaluate your progress. You always want to make sure that you're doing the best. And if you come up with a plan to, say, send a person in to go put out a fire, they come back asking for another fire extinguisher because they tried to put out the fire and the fire's not out, that tells me that the fire is too big. So we're going to evaluate our progress, our plan, and say, let's just get everybody out of the building, and we'll have to let the fire department take care of it, because it's too big. So the good thing about your size up, when you get to number 8, you can, or I'm sorry, number 9, you can always evaluate, and if you need to change, you can. I'd say the hardest one here is number 6, making decisions. And until you get a little bit of experience dealing with emergencies, number 6 is probably going to be the most toughest for you, is to make a decision of what you need to get done first. So based on that size up, it helps responders decide whether to attempt to suppress a fire, and it also gives them a plan of action as to what you're going to do. So one of the things that you want to do is you got your fire do's and your fire don'ts. So you always want to ask yourself these questions if you and your buddy are thinking about putting out a fire is, do we have the right equipment? Based on what's burning, do we have the right extinguisher? Do we have the right resources to put this fire out? Are there any other hazards? Do we have any electrical hazards we have to worry about? Is there any natural gas leaking into the building which could eventually explode? So make sure that you got that all taken care of. Is the building structurally damaged? We're going to talk about that later in the week about search and rescue and damage and how to assess that. Can me and my buddy escape? Fire is extremely sneaky. It'll come right up behind you. So you always got to make sure that you and your buddy have a way out of a room or out of a building. And can me and my buddy fight this fire safely? Remember, your safety is always the top priority, making sure you and your buddy are able to complete the job and do it correctly so that no one gets hurt. So we covered some fire suppression do's. Now these are some of the don'ts. You never want to get too close to a fire. The different fire extinguishers that you can use have a ranges from 20 to 30 feet all the way down to 6 feet. So you have to be within 6 feet of that fire in order for that fire extinguisher to be effective. So that's something that you want to take into effect when you are making these decisions. And you definitely don't want to get too close to a fire. It's way too hot. You can't even get close enough to put it out. It's not a good fire to go after. Never fight a fire alone. Not a good idea. Always make sure you have a buddy. Don't try to suppress large fires. If you, like I said before, if you're using fire extinguishers upon fire extinguishers to put the fire out, that fire is way too big. You can't cool it down fast enough to put it out. And you never enter a smoke-filled area. When you hear of people dying in fires, typically it's the smoke that put them out. There's a lot of toxic, nasty stuff inside of fire, inside the smoke. That's released in the smoke, and you walk into that room or you walk into that area that's filled with smoke, within seconds you can be incapacitated to the point where you're not going to move anymore. So never enter a smoke-filled area. There are different firefighting resources, and the most common one is probably going to be portable fire extinguishers. As you guys know, that they're all over the place in schools, buildings. You name it, you've seen them. So portable fire extinguishers are a great way to put out fires. And after watching the videos and after Ready Camp, you get pretty familiarized with how to use them. Confinement would be another way, and then creative resources. Going back to confinement, easy way to show this is when you guys do your fire drills at the school, what's the last person supposed to do when they leave the room? Close the door. And the reason is because if the fire's in that room, by closing the door you're going to confine it to that room so it doesn't spread. Or the last person closed the door because if the fire's not in that room, we're going to close that door and keep it closed so that the fire doesn't spread into the room. So that would be confining the fire so it doesn't spread. Creative resources would be, you've seen in movies where they've taken scoops of dirt and thrown that on fire, or other ways of removing that fuel, the heat, the oxygen. You've seen it where they've thrown, fire blankets over people that catch on fire. So any way that we can smother the fire, put that fire out, would be considered a creative resource. And here are the different types of fire extinguishers. You have a water extinguisher, you have a dry chemical extinguisher, a carbon dioxide extinguisher, and also specialized fire extinguishers. With the water extinguisher, you can see that I have the feet in parentheses behind that, so you have to be within 20 to 30 feet to put out or to use a water extinguisher on a fire. But again, that putting water on it is typically for a Class A fire or ordinary combustibles, like stuff you'd find in a trash can. A dry chemical, again, it's just a chemical that comes out, and that has to be within 12 to 15 feet of a fire. Carbon dioxide, now we all know that carbon dioxide, you would make dry ice with that, so it's a really cold gas, and in order for that to be effective, you have to be within 6 to 8 feet of the fire. So again, getting a little bit closer to that fire to put that fire out, it has to be a smaller fire. Specialized fire extinguishers, years ago they used to make halon. Halon is complete. It's another gas that they use. Typically you found around computer equipment, and the reason is because they want to protect the computers if they catch on fire, so that the whole room isn't ruined by the way that the fire is put out. With the halon gas, it was released inside the room, and it would go in and take away all the oxygen, and then they'd clear the gas out of the room, and then they can start working with those computers, and there'd be no damage done by the fire. No damage done by putting the fire out. The only damage would be from the fire. So halon was now replaced by a different type of gas, but that would be a specialized fire extinguisher. If you've been trained in how to use a fire extinguisher, you've seen this acronym before, and it's called PASS. And it's pull, you pull the pin, you aim at the base of the fire, you squeeze the lever, and the final S is for sweep. And you'd sweep it across the base of the fire until the fire is out. And you always want to make sure you test the fire extinguisher after pulling the pin. You may look at the extinguisher and see that the pressure indicator is within the green, but unfortunately you give it one little squeeze of the lever and nothing else comes out. So you always want to test your extinguisher, make sure it works before you get too close to that fire. Okay, so now let's talk about hazardous materials. A hazardous material is a material that corrodes other materials, explodes or easily ignited, reacts strongly with water, they're unstable when exposed to heat or shock, are otherwise toxic to humans, animals, or the environment through absorption, inhalation, injection, or ingestion. So that's the bad stuff. And you can usually see these types of materials being transported throughout the United States, and we're going to talk about labeling here in a second, so how you can identify them. But before we do, we can talk about some things you can do at home to make sure that you don't have any hazardous material incidents in your house. Always read labels. Make sure that you know what types of materials you have stored, whether it's in the garage, under the sink, in the bathroom, making sure you have a good understanding what type of chemicals you have in the house. You can use the LIES procedure for storing your different types of chemicals, like your household bleach, drain cleaners, Windex, things like that. And that LIES stands for limit, isolate, eliminate, and separate. Limit the amount of stuff that you have on hand. Do you really need 6 boxes or 6 cases of bleach? Isolate. If you have some stuff that's pretty bad, keep it away from all the other stuff so that it doesn't come in contact with stuff. Eliminate any excess stuff that you have or stuff that you haven't used in a long time, and separate. Make sure that you keep the containers that maybe aren't that harmful, as a single unit, but separate them so that in case one of them spills, it doesn't react with something else that could be in the area. So that's LIES. Limit, isolate, eliminate, and separate. And as I was saying before, how to identify different types of hazardous materials in and around the area. If you go down to a Quick Trip near you, this is called the 704 placard, and they actually have the 704 placard on their propane storage container. So the way that this works is that there's 4 different quadrants, each different colors, and then there's numbers, with 4 being the most hazardous, 1 being the least. So the blue represents health. So whatever the chemical hazardous material is, if it gets outside of its container, this one here in particular is a 3, so it's pretty dangerous if it were to get out. The worst thing you have to worry about on this particular 704 placard is the red, which stands or represents fire. That's listed as a 4, so it's highly explosive, flammable, whatever it may be. And then the yellow is how it reacts, or reactivity. And then you also have the white down there on the bottom. And this one particularly has a W with a line going through it. So whatever this 704 placard is in front of, if it was on fire, you would want to not spray any water on it, because the W with a line through it means do not introduce it to water. So with the training that you guys just received in hazardous materials, which believe me is very limited, You want to treat a hazardous material as a stop sign. Anything that you see that might be hazardous to you, the environment, the community, whatever it might be, think of it as a stop sign. Don't go near it. The clothes that you wear, the things that you have, the protection that you have is not going to protect you. So think of it as a stop sign. Keep people away. Don't enter the area. It's not safe for you. So in summary, what you should know are keys to effective fire suppression. We talked about the ready size up, how to take care of sizing up whether you're going to fight that fire or not fight the fire. We talked about the do's and don'ts. Don't get too close. Never enter a smoke-filled room. All that good stuff. We talked about the classes of fire and also the classes of fire extinguishers, the A, B, C, D, and K. And then we also talked about pass, pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep, and when you're using a fire extinguisher, and how to identify hazardous materials. Remember to always follow safety rules, and your personal safety comes first. You and your buddy need to make sure that you guys are well taken care of yourself, protect each other, so that you guys don't get hurt. So after this unit, you should have a couple of fire extinguishers, a couple of fire extinguisher videos that you can watch, just so you can see how they are used, and hopefully you can join us next year and we can all be together at Ready Camp 2021, and we can actually do these with each other, putting out small fires. If you guys have any questions, feel free to get a hold of myself, Josh, or Paul. We'll be happy to answer any of them. Thanks.